Imrudo. Okay. We good? We good. I am so tired. This is a lot later than I've ever made a video before in my life. That is probably not true, but that's what I'm going with because it's really late and it's way past my bedtime and I should be in bed. But no, I came home from a concert and made you guys a video. I went to a concert tonight. The reason I didn't film the video before the concert is because I ran out of time filming videos that wasn't this one. You know, the one that has to go up first. Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am Britt, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you probably should because I talk about geeky things like Power Rangers. And today we are going to do another episode review of Power Rangers Beast Morphers. This is episode 12, entitled Real Steel. So it's mostly about Steel and Nate, which is amazing. So like always, I'm going to do a total recap of the episode, and if you guys don't want to know what happens, you want to watch it for yourselves, but just want to know some personal opinions, you can skip to this time code right here, and you'll skip that total recap. So enjoy that. We'll see you guys later. So in this episode, we start on Nate and Steel, and Nate is working on this new weapon, and Steel is just desperate to get out of the lab. Steel wants to become a real person. He's very Pinocchio this episode, and he wants to learn what it's like to be human. He wants to be a human. He wants to be treated like a human. But Nate doesn't really understand how any of that works, and he just looks at science as fun. And I mean, that's great because we do need people in the world that think science is fun, because people in the world that think science is fun changes and saves the world. So we need people like Nate in the world. But Steel doesn't quite really want to, live that life, I guess. He wants to go out and do something fun. So Zoe convinces Nate to take Steel out into the world and do something fun. And just as Nate has decided he wants to do this as well, he turns around and there's Devin offering to teach Steel how to play basketball, which you kind of see Nate take on this kind of jealous attitude. So I thought this episode was going to go in the direction of Nate becoming jealous that maybe Steel likes Devin more than he likes him, more than Steel likes him, and it's not the way it went. And I thought that this was kind of, much like I've thought about in other starts to episodes, kind of a misleading beginning, which is an unusual choice for a children's television show. So I don't know what they're thinking and why they're kind of setting up stories and then not following through with those and coming up with completely different stories halfway through. I don't know. So then we hop over to where Blaze is, and he creates a monster out of a commercial-sized copier machine, which of course copies people, and that's the gist of this episode. Good night, everyone. This copying monster copies the delivery driver to to give you the idea of what this monster does and what its special powers are. And then Blaze very slyly says, instead of defeating a Power Ranger, I want you to make one. We head back to the lab where Devin and Steel are coming back from their basketball game, and Steel has the basketball lodged into one of his horns on top of his head. And Devin proclaims to him that you're not supposed to headbutt the basketball. So he takes this deflated basketball, stitches it up, and puts an air hose in it to try and inflate it again. Ends up inflating it a little too much very quickly, so it must be a very powerful air hose. And nearly destroys Nate's weapons that he's been working so diligently on. And Nate freaks out at Steel. And this is kind of where the episode really kind of takes its roots, is right here. It is then when the Rangers are informed that Blaze has appeared with a new monster, and so they go in search of Blaze and the monster. But of course, the monster has now hidden himself as the delivery guy, and Blaze is not really to be seen. Turns out to be a trap where the Rangers are snuck up behind by the monster, and the monster copies Nate. As the fight ensues during this time period, Nate gets himself into some trouble and he calls for help, and here comes Steel, and so he thinks Steel's going to come and save him, but really Steel is going to go and help Devin instead of Nate. And this was kind of more irking on that side of like Nate becoming jealous of Devin and Steel's budding relationship, but again, like it just, nothing came from it. You know, follow through. It's not difficult to have follow through. I haven't said it this video. Power Rangers needs a new showrunner. Hasbro, call me. I will follow through with storylines. The monster is able to escape because Steel is trying to blast the monster, but Nate is there and he was worried that, you know, Nate is going to get hit instead. And so the monster manages an escape, and Nate blames Steel. So Nate is just really laying in on Steel, really getting just pissed off at every turn, every chance he gets at Steel. So they all return to the base, and Nate realizes that he needs to go and get new supplies. And so he goes off and gets supplies, even though their mentor is trying to make everything nice between them, between Nate and Steel, but Nate is just not having it right now. Nate leaves, the monster sees his opportunity, becomes Nate, and goes back in to the base and encounters Steel. And Steel is just so apologetic, he just wants Nate to forgive him, and of course the monster has no idea what's happening and is able to just forgive him and use the fact that obviously the monster knew that Nate was being held by the monster and nearly got blasted by Steel. So he used that to kind of forgive him in a way. And so Steel's feeling a lot better, and Nate tells him to go downstairs and grab some boxes. So Steel goes downstairs to grab some boxes. It was actually kind of just a way of getting Steel to go away. And that's when the real Nate shows up. And so he goes up and he's like, let me help you with that, thinking, of course, Nate is feeling so much better, but Nate is still cold because it's, you know, the real Nate, not the monster Nate. And he just kind of walks off with his stuff. And this leaves Steel very, very, very confused because he thought that Nate had forgiven him, but obviously Nate hadn't forgiven him. And he just was very, very confused about all of it. Zoe at one point stops Nate and tries to figure out the real reason as to why Nate is so angry, because she brings up the fact that Ben and Betty make all kinds of crazy mistakes and he forgives them very, very quickly. So why should Steel be any different? Kind of like last week's episode when Zoe took the rap for Ben and Betty because Devin would be less angry. This show makes no sense sometimes. It's fine. It turns out that his real reason for being upset is because he was raised in a lab, and he was raised in this lab. You know, this was his life. This has been his whole life, and he doesn't know how to do the fun things outside, like play basketball. And because he had never been given, he doesn't know how to do the fun things outside, like play basketball. He was never given that opportunity. And that's what made him so angry, was his own shortcomings, I guess. Zoe's able to convince him to forgive Steel. And Steel is overhearing all of this, and he's realizing that this is why Nate was so short with him, why Nate was so angry. It's then that Steel notices the monster Nate and realizes there are two Nates. So he goes following the other Nate, realizing that something is wrong, and confronts the monster. The monster then copies himself into making him look like Steel during this confrontation, and the others are all called to the lab to go and find the intruder, and they find two Steels in the room, in the lab. So of course they're having the whole who's the real Steel moment, and Steel is able then to recall the conversation that Zoe and Nate just had, and that was when they realized that the other one was the monster. The monster manages to destroy the computer that summons the Zords. So the original three follow the monster outside to fight him, while Nate and Steel hang back to try and save the computer so that they can call the Zords if they need to. So like always, we are forced to have a Megazord fight. Devin's fighting the monster all alone, and then finally the computer is fixed enough to get the other two Zords out. And by this point, the monster has now copied Devin's Zord. So they get there, and Devin Zord is, there's two of them, guys. There's just two of them, and they just can't handle it. And then Zoe comes up with this great idea as to figuring out who the real Devin is, and that is to shoot at both of them. Somehow this works, though, and the other monster changes back into, you know, the monster, and they're able to defeat the monster. And then the episode ends with Steele agreeing to teach Nate how to play basketball. So they all go out and play basketball together. And Nate ends up inside the hoop. It's strange. So there you guys have it. There's the full episode recap of episode 12, Real Steel. And as you can tell, I kind of have weird feelings about it. There are great things about it. I actually really liked the character development for Nate, and we're going to get into that in just a second. I'm going to say something very controversial, but that's fine. I'll defend myself. But there's one massive problem I have with this particular episode. So let's start with the good stuff. First of all, there's very little Ben and Betty. As you guys know from like the first video I ever did about Beast Morphers, which was the first impressions after I'd seen a couple of episodes, I don't like Ben and Betty. I think their actors are fine. I don't mind their actors. I think their actors are good. But the actual execution and writing for the characters, it just is not great in any way, shape, or form. Like, I'm just not into it. Just not into those characters. I think that they should have dialed them back a little bit. Like 600 notches. I thought that the writing for them was just cheesy and not great. Too cartoony for something that just isn't outwardly cartoony in the way the Power Rangers really could be, but they made everybody else so normal, and they don't have everybody else being like, this is not normal. It's just, if you're gonna make Steve Urkel, make Steve Urkel right. That's how I feel about Ben and Betty. They're just like basically Steve Urkel, but just done poorly. And it just makes me very sad and angry. So less Ben and Betty is always a good thing because it just makes me angry when they're in the episode. I think that Abraham is really able to show his acting capabilities in this episode, being that he had to play two different roles, essentially. He had to play Nate and the monster, and he played them both differently, and that was really good. Even when he was trying to be Nate, you could tell that he was somebody else trying to be Nate. And so it was Abraham acting like somebody who's trying to be his character. And I thought that he did such a great job with that. I hope someday he stumbles across his video and he's able to understand, like, I thought that he did really, really well. And this is coming from somebody who is really tough on actors, especially young actors, because young actors come with a lot of flatness to them. And he has never shown any form of flatness, and he has a really great career ahead of him. And I'm very excited to see what he does with this character going forward. But yeah, being able to play both those characters and be able to be an actor who is playing a part that is trying to be his other character, I just think that was very well done. And I adore him. I mean, Nate is quickly becoming my favorite Power Ranger in this season. Something else about Nate that really became just glaringly obvious, and this is the controversial thing that I'm about to say. Hold your horses, because it's real controversial, and I'm sorry for saying it, but Nate is how Billy should have been. I know I said it. Now let me explain myself. Here's the thing. When the first season of Power Rangers happened, we had these very stereotypical archetypal characters. So we had the jock in Jason, we had the cool guy in Zach, we had the nerd in Billy, we had the cheerleader type with Kimberly, and we had the kind of more nerdy girl in Tarini. There really isn't a lot to any of those characters. There's no real substance to any of them. There were definitely things that were given to them for good character development, and I'm not saying there wasn't character development. I'm not saying that they weren't good characters. I'm just saying that Nate is what Billy should have been in the regards of how the character should have been written. More conflict with who he thinks he should be versus who he actually is, and having to learn that balance and be okay with that balance. And I just think that he's really well written in a season that has not been stellar. They have some really cool characters and they cast it very well. You know, like I've said before, I really like Roxy, who was not in this episode at all, and I really like Nate. I think that those two are probably the two best characters in this show. And even though the show itself is poorly written, poorly executed, those characters, for some reason, they're like, well, let's put a little more effort into these characters than we will with anybody else. Now for the bad. So this is just one thing that I cannot stand about this episode. And that is because one of my favorite episodes of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is Wannabe Ranger. The Wannabe Ranger is one of my favorite episodes of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and the fact that this was kind of trying to be the Wannabe Ranger, it was done so poorly because there was no conflict. I mean, there was conflict, but there wasn't like enough conflict between the who's who situation. I mean, now here's the thing. Watch the Wannabe Ranger and then watch this episode back to back and tell me that the Wannabe Ranger episode is not better. And I think part of it is just the fact that Nickelodeon forces a lot more advertisement. So, I mean, it makes sense, but there just isn't enough story there. Like, Wannabe Ranger was just so well done in the sense of, like, the monster lies to the other Rangers to get the Rangers to go do things that puts them in danger, and they're fighting and they're trying so hard to, like, the monster's trying so hard to make sure that they have no idea who's who, and they're tricking them by making them think that Tommy's losing his power. I mean, there's so many things about the Wannabe Ranger that makes it so much better than this episode. Hasbro, call me. I will do better than your showrunner currently. Oh my god, I hate it. So there you guys go. Another episode where I'm just like, it was all right. Some really good things about this episode, though, unlike last episode, which I just didn't like at all. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode in the comments below, and I will see you guys all on Thursday with another geeky video, or next Monday with another episode review of Power Rangers. Power Rangers Beast Morphers. Now I gotta stop my cat from playing with things that are not hers. Have a good night, everyone. I'm going to bed. It is nearly midnight now. Way past my bedtime. I'm old. Hey guys, and welcome back to my video. Welcome back to this one video, because you've been to this video before. This video is not brand new. Oh man, now when somebody does watch it and it's like 5 years old, why? When somebody does watch it and it's 5 years old, it is not a new video. Anyway, all right. My cat's gone insane. She's just happy I'm home. She thought I wasn't coming home tonight, I don't think.